Hello, this is Coding Gicha for full-stack developers. I will explain how to connect to MySQL or MariaDB from PHP and query data stored in the database. Since MariaDB is designed to be perfectly compatible with MySQL, using MySQLi or PDO MySQL in PHP allows you to connect to MariaDB as well as MySQL. I will explain how to install MySQL connection drivers on Ubuntu, a Linux distribution, in addition to Windows. Since PHP extension modules are installed via the System Package Manager on Linux, you can install MySQL extension modules on Ubuntu using apt. Installing MySQL extension modules via apt installs both MySQLi and PDO MySQL. PDO MySQL is an object-oriented database connection method with enhanced features compared to the previous MySQLi. Both MySQLi and PDO strongly support prepared statement to prevent SQL injection. However, while MySQLi only supports positional parameters, PDO also supports named parameters. I personally avoid MySQLi, which only supports positional parameters, because SQL queries using positional parameters can result in code filled with question marks, making them difficult to read. On Windows, the PHP installation file is usually downloaded as a pre-built compressed file, and this file includes all extension modules. I will open the php.ini file. On Windows, instead of installing PHP extension modules, you load them by uncommenting the ones you intend to use. Since the CLI environment on Windows is limited, I will configure this using the GUI editor Sublime Text. For PHP, there are MySQLi and PDO MySQL extension modules. As mentioned earlier, I will load PDO MySQL by uncommenting its lines. PDO has the advantage of being usable with not only MySQL but also PostgreSQL, Oracle, and others using the same API method. To apply the changes to the php.ini file, you must restart the Apache HTTP server. I will implement the task of connecting to MariaDB from PHP in Visual Studio Code. I will write example code that actually connects to MariaDB from PHP and queries data using PDO MySQL. I will create a database handler as a PDO object. A PDO object takes a DSN, user, and password as parameters for its constructor. The DSN stands for Data Source Name. A MySQL DSN allows you to connect to MySQL and MariaDB. If you are connecting to other DBMSs such as PostgreSQL or Oracle, you should configure the appropriate DSN. Once the PDO object is created, you can use generalized code that is not coupled to the DBMS. I will configure it so that a PDO exception is raised in the event of a database error, allowing for stable error handling using a try-catch block. I will create an object to handle SQL query statements. SQL query statements can be passed as parameters to query methods. However, if variable substitution is required in the SQL query statement, it is recommended to use the prepare method to prevent SQL injection. In PHP, DBH is commonly used as the name for the DB connection object, but since con is more frequently used in other languages, I will change it to a name that is independent of a programming language. I will also change the name of the object that handles SQL query statements to a common name widely used in other languages. Since SQL query syntax is generally multi-line, I will write it using nowdoc syntax. By placing a marker that indicates the end of the multi-line after 3 opening arrow brackets, you can write the string up to the declared marker as a multi-line string. If you start by placing the marker after 3 opening arrow brackets without quotation marks, it is herdoc. If you start by placing the marker after 3 opening arrow brackets enclosed in quotation marks, it is nowdoc. Herdoc is a syntax that allows you to use a string as a multi-line string, just like a string enclosed in double quotes, while nowdoc is a syntax that allows you to use a string as a multi-line string, like a string enclosed in single quotes. Using nowdoc allows you to use escaped characters directly in the SQL query syntax, and it also strengthens SQL injection prevention. I will copy and paste the SQL query that I have written in advance. This is an SQL query that retrieves data in a hierarchical structure based on BOM ID. I will cover the SQL query in detail separately when explaining how to implement it using tree views and block diagrams. I will paste it between the nowdoc syntax. The indentation of multiline strings is based on the indentation of the closing ETO marker. PHP supports herdoc and nowdoc, and since it is a scripting language unlike languages that require compilation or mapping, processing is not strictly necessary. Named parameters in PDO prepared statements start with a colon. When executing in SQL query with a PDO statement, if there are named parameters, you can pass them in an associative array. The BOM ID will be received as a parameter of the get method. If no parameter is passed, the default value will be 1. Since this is a select query, you must retrieve the results after execution. Here I need to retrieve multiple columns as a list, so I will use !fetch all . You can set the !fetch mode for receiving values in various ways. It can be received as an associative array, index array, column, or object. If not specified, it is returned as both an associative array and an index array. Associative arrays are commonly used. Although there are various combinations, I will summarize only the generally used patterns. It is better to separate the PHP implementation code and the HTML output page using the MVC pattern, but due to time constraints, I will write everything on a single page here. I will output the results of querying BOM materials in a hierarchical structure using a depth-first search query. Although HTML styles should also be moved to a CSS file to improve readability and maintainability, I have written them inline due to time constraints as well. Let's check this in a web browser. I will request the BOM processing page. Since the BOM ID was not passed, the hierarchical structure of skateboard with BOM ID 1 has been displayed. I will request the BOM hierarchy for the ladder back chair. I will explicitly request the BOM hierarchy for the skateboard again. Thank you for watching.